You don't need to be the biggest star in the world in order to drive economic value for yourself. Find an audience, super serve that audience, build a cult, and then figure out the way to earn a living off of that love. People will pay you if they love you, but you have to give them something to love, and then you have to continue to do that, and you have to supply them what they demand. But if you can find 1,000 people to pay you $10 a month, it's $120,000 a year. So you can create an ecosystem for yourself that gives you the support necessary to make what it is that you want to make or do the things that you want to do.
Welcome to R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast. Excited to share today's guest story with you all. Evan Shapiro, thanks for hopping on. Really appreciate the time. And I think you're the first ever Emmy and Peabody winner to come on the Reason for Everything podcast. So welcome.
Oh, thanks so much. Glad to be here.
So as mentioned before we started filming, I came across you and your domain in, I guess, probably a month or two ago on LinkedIn when you shared one of your many amazing media maps. And I'd love to just give you a second to introduce yourself to my audience, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I guess you could best describe me as a media gadfly at this point. But a lot of people describe me as the unofficial official cartographer of the media universe. I've done a ton of different things in media, including running marketing at the New York Shakespeare Festival for Shakespeare in the Park, to marketing in television, to running IFC, running Sundance Channel, running television division for Participant Media, running a comedy streaming service for NBC called CISO. I produced shows like Portlandia, which we won a Peabody Award for. I produced a show with Joseph Gordon-Levitt called Hit Record, which is what we won the Emmy for. But also Harmonquest, This Film Is Not Yet Rated, a whole bunch of things. A number of years ago, I pivoted hard and leaned into writing and punditing about the media universe, predominantly through the desire of wanting to be a creator of my own stuff. And so the maps and the writing that I write pretty much every day on LinkedIn, which is how you came to me. I write a couple of times a week on a Substack newsletter called Media, War, and Peace. And so, it's really gratifying that every day I get to, wake up, read, have an idea, write, create these weird infographics, which I've become somewhat known for. And, I spent a lot of time speaking about the media industry. I'm about to do NAB here in New York. I'm about to do a couple conferences in Europe. And I'm about to do Advertising Week in New York. But I also get to teach media and entertainment at Fordham University and NYU for the last 15 years. So it's a really portfolio lifestyle, which I very much dig. But it's all driven around this ongoing essay I'm writing about the media ecosystem that, started about, 6 or 7 years ago and doesn't seem to be ending.
What's the end goal for you? Are you going to try to put that all together and make a documentary, or are you just moving forward day by day and seeing where it takes you?
What's fascinating is it's turned into a really nice consulting business for me. So I get to work with these great companies and public service media too, which is really gratifying for me. And so, so I get to practice it too. I don't only get to talk about it. So that's really fun. But I don't have to run a big enterprise. At one point, I ran 2 channels, IFC and Sundance Channel together, and that was like 400 employees all in, and I hated it. I just did not like it. I didn't know everybody. I got promoted past the things that I actually love to do. And when I tried to do those things, people whose jobs those were got pissed off. So, now I run a very small practice with, total of 5 employees, all very young, either former students of mine or former interns of mine. And, it's all creatives, all trained filmmakers. We take everything from a creative standpoint. So we're really a creative bunch who does analytics. And, being able to use the left brain to drive the right brain has been very successful for us. And it's gotten us a certain notoriety that I also enjoy because I'm a narcissist. So it's been really just a wonderful experience. And I am entirely self-driven. Now, I've been very fortunate. I've had really big jobs that have paid me very well, that allowed me to build a nest egg, that got me to a point where I could take a risk. But now, so the end goal is to just be happy. I know that sounds corny, but
No,
that's the goal.
not corny at all, and a common theme across many of the guests and discussions that I've had on this episode. My only real glimpse into the media universe as a outside of an observer when watching a show or listening to a program or whatever it is through Succession and seeing the kind of
Great show.
parallels that
It's my ringtone, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I tried to learn the theme song on piano, and
It's tough.
It's tough, but it's unbelievable. So maybe I'd love to just get your take, and this is an absolute loaded question, so take this however you like. But what's the current state of play in the media universe? Obviously, there's some massive conglomerates that are running a bunch, but how do you see the current state of play? Where are we headed towards? What's piquing your interest, catching your eye right now?
Yeah, I think there's this. So I've written about this thing called the media apocalypse, which is we're in the midst of here in the United States predominantly. These coincided strikes and the melting down of all the business models. But I think there's this misperception that the media ecosystem is headed somewhere. We are there. We arrived there about 4 years ago in 2019 when Disney decided to go direct to consumers and launch Disney Plus, and everybody followed suit in the ensuing 12 months. And then that coincided with lockdown, which created this accelerated rate of change in the media ecosystem. So all of these services got way more subscribers far more quickly than they ever anticipated. Disney surpassed Netflix in total worldwide subscribers in less than 3 years. And then 90 days later, they fired their CEO. And whether it's Spotify or Fast, all these new use cases, and Spotify wasn't new, but they got into podcasting just about that time. And so they rode the same curve. And there was this misperception in kind of the C-suite towers in Hollywood that this behavior was going to last forever. And there were some in big tech too, but it was really bought into by the Disneys and the Netflixes that this behavior was forever, which was just dumb as fuck. And what happened really was right at that time, the second everybody went from a channel-based business, a wholesale business, to an app-based business, to a direct-to-consumer business, they ceded all of the control to the consumer. They finally ceded, and the map demonstrated this. The first map was in 2020, so almost 4 years ago now. And the reason why I put all the big tech Death Stars on the map in their full market valuation next to the Disneys and Netflixes was to show the scale, was to show this is the battle, and the old school companies, including Netflix, are going to lose to big tech, because this is how we control our worlds. This device, which is our bundle, we now program all of our entertainment and media in our system settings with our thumbs, swipe right, swipe left, on a moment's notice. I did a survey with Publishers Clearinghouse, a few months ago that showed that 93% of consumers are reconsidering their entire subscription suite every single month. And then I did a chart using Hub Research data a couple months ago, which showed that less than half of all media services that people use are considered must-have. So 93% of consumers are reconsidering more than half of their entire suite of services, entertainment and media services, every single month. Doesn't mean they're changing them all every month, but they are changing a lot of them. Churn in streaming subscription is up 28% year on year. It's serial churning, signing up for something, watching something, and then canceling the service before the next billing cycle is the new channel changing. So we're not going anywhere. We are there. We are in the heart of the user-centric media era. It started about 3 or 4 years ago officially. The streaming wars were not a thing. They were the end of an era and the beginning of this new user-centric era. And big tech is now in charge. There are 2 companies that control 100% of the smartphones on the planet Earth. 2 companies. There are 5 or 6 companies in the world now that control so much share of attention and share of time, including Apple, all the notable ones: Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, but also Nvidia and Samsung. And they have a disproportionate amount of power. Now, there are some people who are like, oh my gosh, it's the end of everything. Not really. If you go back 25 years, if you go back 50 years, if you go back 100 years, there's always 5 or 6 companies that control most of the mind share of the worldwide public's attention. It's never not really been that way. I mean, I guess if you go back 100 years, maybe it's a little bit more fragmented, but not really. And so, the BBC is a powerful entity in the UK. BBC, Channel 4, ITV, they control a lot of mind share there. But all of them have to go through Apple and Google and Amazon and Samsung. And, and they're not ever going to not have to do that until the next Pangea forms. So what's fascinating to me is this conversation now that I'm having with the ecosystem, that is, next is not coming, it's now. Change is not on the way, it's here. We are in the user-centric era of media. The map that I made in 2020 was not a prediction, it was a pronouncement. And that pronouncement has become absolutely the truth, which is, this is where we are. And if you are in the media ecosystem and you're not prepared to do the business that the Apples, the Amazons, the Googles are doing, that's fine. You won't be here in 2 or 3 years. That's fine. Someone else will do it for you. But if you can pivot, and I use the New York Times as a really good case study for this, then you do have a future.
And you mentioned the Pangea of these organizations coming together. What's the big bang then? What's going to separate them? What's their existential threat to, I guess, some sort of I guess, what is the next? What's
That's a hard one. It's hard to understand who's in a garage somewhere inventing something that's going to disturb the big tech Death Stars now.
Yeah.
I don't have my vision on that yet. I think there's people out there who say TikTok, and I don't think the Chinese government really has enough disruptive power to upset the apple cart of the big tech Death Stars. And remember, TikTok can't have an audience if they don't go through Google and Apple. Like, they're literally out of business. So, I think it's very likely that somewhere, is it Gen AI? Maybe. I think Gen AI is a paintbrush, not a canvas. So we'll see. I think, we still have a good decade of supremacy of the big tech Death Stars. I mean, Apple is it's not just a powerful company, it's an incredibly well-run company. Google is not just a powerful company, it's a very well-run company. Amazon is not just a powerful company, it's also a very well-run company. And in fact, Jeff Bezos, 25 years ago, wrote the mission statement for the user-centric era of media. It's the mission statement of Amazon. So he predicted it. We are here. The consumer is the center of everything. And I honestly don't think the consumer is going to give it the power back very easily. So I think if you want to know what's coming, is whoever can super serve the consumer better will disrupt. But it's all going to be much more, and the creator economy is going to be a massive, 68% of time spent on media is spent with stuff outside of the gatekeeper economy. It's on social video, it's on social media, gaming. And so I think, what's coming is the consumer has to understand what they want to do with the power that they now have. And I think Gen Z and Gen A, as they age, as Gen Z becomes, 25, 30%, 40% of the workforce over the next 15 years, I think they'll change how these companies are run, and then we'll see what happens there.
Super fascinating. And you mentioned Gen AI, and the wheels turned in my head, and I've heard from a bunch of different folks and read a bunch of different articles of the idea of, down the road, if you want to watch an old James Bond and superimpose your face as James Bond, you'll probably have the ability to do that. Again, who knows from a rights perspective how that all shakes out. But again, to your point, the consumer has that power, but you still will have to go through Apple or Amazon or someone else to be able to get there. So yeah.
And by the way, I think there's this misperception that the consumer minds that. I don't think that they do. These are very powerful tools of entertainment, of creation, of communication, of convenience. And so, we like these things as consumers. That we've been not just trained, but we err on the side of things that make us powerful and that make us that give us convenience and give us entertainment, give us joy. Sometimes, the dopamine can be too addictive, but at the end of the day, there's a reason these products are successful. It's because they're really good products.
Absolutely. Now, last point on the whole maybe Gen AI thing, and then we can turn the page. Obviously, the SAG what's the word I'm looking for? There was the strikes recently, and they stood
WGA and the SAG strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right. How was really that impacting what you were doing on a day-to-day basis? What was your perspective on the whole situation? Again, another loaded question. Feel free to take it however you'd like. But that was obviously a very contentious time over the last few months in your domain.
Still is.
Right.
SAG rejected the offer and walked away from the table today.
I didn't even catch that. Wow.
Yeah, but I think that kind of double clicks on what I was saying is this is not just SAG and WGA. The healthcare workers in the United States are on strike, largest healthcare strike in the history of America, largest, I think, auto strike in the history of America, affecting the entire auto industry. The user, the personal power of the consumer has made a huge comeback. The consumer, the citizen, has made a huge comeback since COVID. Lockdown really changed everything. The Depression changed everything, and it wasn't really, and the 1-2 punch of the Depression and World War II kind of semi-coinciding. Really, I mean, it changed everything forever. The whole outlook of the planet Earth. America as a superpower. We weren't before the Great Depression. We weren't before World War I. We are the only one left. The way boomers look at the world, the way Depression babies look at the world, the way the greatest generation looked at the world changed dramatically because of those events. The same thing is going to happen on the other side of this, and you can already see it. The racial reckoning in the United States, but really, I think the larger, lasting power. Unfortunately, the racial reckoning is probably going to dissipate, and it is dissipating. But the workforce reckoning is massive. I don't think there is no putting that genie back in the bottle. There's a union movement in the United States. There hasn't been a serious union movement in the United States in my lifetime. I mean, you have to go back to the 70s to really remember when unions mattered as much as they do today. And they're not only unionizing for better pay and better benefits, which they are, but Google unionized to fight against bias in the creation of Gen AI and in the search engines. So they're also stopping work. I think it was Tinder. No, it was some dating app. Mandated it back to work for 100% of the company, and then if you didn't like it, you could leave, and half the company left. So, people are making choices, and I think part of it is like, obviously life is too fucking short to work at a company that doesn't value you the way that you want to be valued. And, the ability to start your own company, to, like me, work inside the creator economy. My entire livelihood right now is generated through the creator economy. If you ask people who are under the age of 20, 2/3 of them would prefer to be a creator than anything else. Doesn't mean they will, but that's what their choice would be. So I do think the union work stoppage in entertainment is indicative of a larger global movement that is going to. I think we're at the beginning of that. I don't think we're at the end of that. I think the other thing that really became, and it's something I've talked about before the strikes, but it became very starkly clear during the strikes, is the leadership of the Hollywood entertainment industrial complex is over. They're out of ideas. They have no fucking idea what they're doing. We knew that beforehand because their business models were crumbling, but their mismanagement of these strikes is, it's malpractice. And it just shows how out of touch these millionaires who get paid 50, 100, $250 million a year to run these companies that have nothing without the talent. Like, what are they without Greta Gerwig? What are they without, Zendaya? What are they without, the Property Brothers? Like, these companies don't exist without the intellectual property that's generated by the artists. And here they were just shutting down their own industry. And ultimately, they gave the writers everything that they wanted. So 5 months of work stoppage for no good fucking reason. And now they're doing the same thing with the actors, who they really can't live without. Like, they can't live without the writers. They thought, all right, well, we can write the scripts with Gen AI. That's not going to work out. But you got to put an actor on camera, right? These are the people, like, they can't promote their shows now. They're putting off shows. They can't. The Emmys are postponed. So these are the septuagenarian country club vest-wearing morons who, and they weren't morons always. They were smart at one point. And then they hit their height. and then we should have taken the keys away from them. But instead, Bob Iger came back out of retirement to put on a bathrobe and sell off pieces of the Disney empire in his front yard on a card table like an old man in La Boca Vista. So I just don't, is this really the best we can do right now? And it's obviously not. And I think the strike and the epic mishandling of the strike and just the epic PR mishandling. These are professional communication executives. These are people who went to Ivy League colleges. They couldn't handle the PR aspect of it. Like if you fuck up the negotiations, but handle the PR. And they had several let them eat cake moments during the strike, like several, each one of them, several times had let them eat cake moments. And I'm not sure if you remember what happened to the lady who said, let them eat cake, but it did not end well.
I mean, from an outsider looking in, it just seems like there was a lot of pieces of resolution that could have been agreed upon earlier, and they shook out in the same sense to your point. And the only glass half full, I guess, takeaway that we got from it was Strike Force 5, the night show hosts starting their own podcast. I did enjoy that takeaway from the.
No, that was fun. It only lasted, I think, 10 episodes, but it was very fun. Funnier than all their shows are these days. But yes, I thought it was a good show.
Let me ask you this: who do you think of the different call them the Death Stars? I like that analogy of the Death Stars. Which of those organizations do you think has the capacity to turn things around, or who do you think the front runner is to emerge past these kind of tumultuous times we're in right now? Who do you think?
I think they already have. I mean, that's the thing is don't feel bad for them. They're all doing really well. I think that it's the notable, four. I think Amazon. I would not bet against that company. I think they've done a lot of things incredibly well. I think they've done some things badly. I think the transition of power from Bezos to Jassy was not as smooth as it should have been. I think, though, Jassy has righted the ship. He overinvested. He chased after the e-commerce thing in a way that was misguided because he didn't understand e-commerce really that well. He's a cloud guy. But I think he's handled the vast majority of that enterprise well. It's the fastest growing ad platform on the face of the earth. A huge sports player now. So I think they're doing quite well. I think Google has all of the assets, biggest video service on the face of the earth, biggest ad platform on the face of the earth, fastest growing connected television platform on the face of the earth, one of the 2 or 3 biggest music platforms on the face of the earth. YouTube TV is a great product. NFL Sunday Ticket. I think Apple has stumbled unnaturally so in recent times, but I think they're going to be fine. And I think the deal that they made with Messi for MLS was ingenious and demonstrative of how, if you don't come from inside the bubble, you can think outside the bubble. Like, that's the way all talent deals should be done, is incentivized, aligned with the executives who run the company. When we succeed, you succeed. And we will tell you exactly how you're doing all along the way against these metrics. You can scale that. That's a scalable model. And I think Microsoft, them getting Activision is a big move. I think, they have the 6th largest social media platform on the face of the earth in LinkedIn. It's how we met. My favorite social media platform, really the only social media platform left that isn't awful. They have a massive gaming platform, as I just said. I think it's only a matter of time till they get into television. They have an ad product. So, those 4 companies, and again, they're big, they have scale, they have unfair scale, but they did build that unfair scale, from the ground up. Yes, they're all anti-competitive without question, and they should be regulated more than they are without question. But at the same time, they're also really well-run companies by smart motherfuckers who know what they're doing and think ahead. They look ahead. Tim Cook, as much as it was a head fake for everybody, he basically destroyed social media as a platform. Well, other than Meta, they're almost all done, right?
Why do you say that? Maybe it's just my own naivety here.
So about 3 years ago, he changed the privacy settings in the App Store, and he basically put out a business. He took apart social media. I mean, yeah, Meta will make it to the other side, but Twitter's done, Snap is basically done, Pinterest is almost done, Reddit is almost done, and he's building an ad product on the other side of it. He knew he was going to lose a decent part of the antitrust or the court cases in the App Store. They already have to allow platforms to find an alternative payment, and which means they're going to lose double-digit billions in revenue in just taxes, 18-20 billion dollars a year in taxes. Not all of it, but they'll lose a decent amount of it, or some of it. And so it's not as big a growth area as it was. But he started investing in the service area, in 2016, preparing for this very moment. That's foresight. That's vision. Can you name Bob Iger didn't do that. David Zaslav didn't do that. Ted Sarandos didn't do that. Barely has an ad product. So, the Satya Nadella, Microsoft, like the OpenAI investment, brilliant. If he doesn't get Activision, which he will, but if he doesn't get Activision, he has alternative paths to go down. He pivoted that company personally from a single unit sales company to a subscription business and saved the company. Steve Ballmer was one of the worst CEOs in the history of American corporations. And that company was on the brink when they named the new CEO. And now that company's the second most valuable company in the history of the world. So, there's vision there. There is foresight there. There's planning there. So I wouldn't feel sorry for any of them. I think we are playing in their court now. Are they perfect? No company's perfect. Do they do bad things? 100%. They all do terrible things. The first 5 columns I wrote on my newsletter were about how bad those companies are as actors in the world with regards to competitive fairness. But you gotta respect the game, man. I hate Tom Brady. I hate him. But Jesus, he's the best quarterback to ever play the game.
You're preaching to the choir with that last one there. But let's. I mean, we just spent 30 minutes down this rabbit hole. I could keep picking away, but I'd love to dive into your story a little bit more. And I'll be sure to plug your Substack link and all of your other socials, I guess your LinkedIn social in the show notes so people can keep up with you following this industry because your material is just unbelievable. But you're wearing your Phillies t-shirt now. You mentioned you're a professor at one of the best business schools in the world, being Stern, and also at Fordham as well. You didn't graduate from undergrad. Let's get the audience up to speed on Evan. Did you grow up in the Philly area? Is that where your Phillies love comes from?
I was born in Penn State. Both my parents went there. I grew up primarily in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. And I grew up there until I was about 18. And then I went to UMass and got way too high for way too long and then dropped out. And moved back to Philly for a little bit. And then I moved to New York and made my way through theater, of all things. Worked in theater ads, ticket sales, then advertising, and then I became the head of marketing, the first head of marketing in the history of the New York Shakespeare Festival, the Public Theater. George Wolfe had taken it over, and I rebranded it with a great agency called Pentagram Paula Shares firm. And the brand that still lives on the public today is the one we launched together. I worked my way through theater. I opened my own agency, which was a lot of fun. That's where I really learned Business Principles 101. That was my college and master's degree in business. And then I went to work in television, and I worked for what was called Core TV at the time, became True TV. There is a Core TV now; it's a different thing. And then I went to IFC, took over as marketing there, and became head of the channel, and then took over IFC as well. I would say as a kid, my hero was Brandon Tartikoff, which is a weird person to have as a hero. But he was the youngest person to ever run a network at the time. And, the idea that someone could wake up every day and decide what was on the TV was really, a motivating factor for me. I was one of the first latchkey kids. My parents were divorced and my mom worked. And so, my babysitter every afternoon, my best friend every afternoon was a television set. And whether it was reruns of Gilligan's Island or Star Trek or original shows on TV like Hill Street Blues, or, MASH or Mary Tyler Moore, they became my foreign language of how the world works. And I think what's interesting is I think I'm not alone in that anywhere in the world. Here in the United States, I think it's an obvious shared experience. But if you talk to someone who grew up somewhere around the rest of the world. If they speak English well, they probably learned it from the same set of shows. And, I think one of the great things about what's happened to me since is watch this great fragmentation of television so that you can get things like Portlandia, which not nearly as many people watch, right? Which is a show I helped co-create. And it can become a hit. A Fleabag can become a hit. A Please Like Me can become a hit, which is a show I helped produce. But on the other side of it, there's this lack of shared experience. There are very few hearths that we share as a society anymore, and I do mourn that. I do mourn the idea that 60% of the country would sit down. It happens. Super Bowl once in a while. 100 million people sit down and watch it, but that's very rare now. Now a big show gets 10 million people. 8 million people. In a country of 330 million on a planet of 8 billion, we don't have a common language anymore. And I think, back in the day, in 1972, the number one show on television was All in the Family. I watched it religiously with my family when they were still together. And Meathead and Archie, Carol O'Connor and Rob Reiner would argue the Vietnam War, racial tensions, homosexuality, women's rights. And then the next day, all of the Meatheads and Archies across the country would have a common language to share, to argue it out and talk about it and share a beer. And yeah, there were protests and things didn't get along all the time. And especially if you were a person of color, it wasn't a great era. But progress was made. We did take major incremental steps on a year-to-year basis because we shared a common language. We do not anymore. Fox News viewers and MSNBC viewers don't talk to each other. They don't even share the same set of facts. And that's the people who watch those two channels. Then there's everybody else who doesn't even bother with it anymore because the cacophony is too loud. And we go off into our little rabbit holes and each of us watches our own little show within the house. Four people will be watching two different things. They're not only not sharing the same shows, they're not sharing the same room anymore. And, as a father of two young women, I lament that. I watch the evolution of our culture through the lens of our lenses over the last too many years. I'll mention 56, so 40 some odd years, 50 years. And we've gained so much. There's no excuse to watch a bad television show because you can always find something else to watch. Drops of Gods, which I've been watching on Apple, like a remarkable television show that never would have been made 20 years ago. But on the other hand, if someone didn't tell me to watch that show, I never would have watched it. And it was on my own TV. It was sitting there waiting to be watched. I think we're losing the thread as a society, and I think it's a big part of why the culture is where it is right now.
It's almost like the streaming services have turned our TVs into libraries where you have everything on the shelf at any time. To your point, you could just pull off and open up that metaphorical book or whatever show it is. I will say it is nice, the sense of community that was felt when the new Game of Thrones spinoff, or I guess prequel, House of Dragons came out, or Succession came out for their final season, and being back in the office with my colleagues and being able to talk about that every Monday morning, having that common language. Obviously, in Game of Thrones, it's not like you're talking about common day problems, right? But still having that sense of community was really well. Right. Exactly. Yeah, maybe. Exactly. So it is interesting, but to that end, I'm curious how that's, my hypothesis is that one of the big streaming, I guess, as the media Death Stars come together, and someone's going to go and just scoop up the rest of them and basically bundle cable back for us at some point. That's my prediction, but I'm 100%. Curious if that
100%. Yeah. Because the economics aren't there otherwise. I think there's a misperception. So the cable bundle was important because it put everything in one place. It created discovery just by the fact that there was a channel above the channel you're watching and a channel below the channel you're watching, and a show on before and a show on after. So the discovery of it was super important. IFC wouldn't have existed without it, right? Sundance Channel wouldn't have existed without it. Bravo wouldn't have existed, which is still a major channel to these days. But these channels were formed by dint of the fact that they were next to CBS and ABC and the rest of them on the dot. On the other hand, there's a larger protective shell that existed around it for the last 30 years of cable, which is it was bundled itself in with broadband and phone. And that's where all the profit came from. Like video was basically a break even, maybe even a loss leader to a certain extent, but broadband was pure profit. And phone was even profit on top of that because it was a product on top of a product. And so that protective shell was what enabled the golden era of television. There would be no Mad Men. There would be no Breaking Bad. There would be no Walking Dead. There would be no FX if there wasn't the triple play, which created unnatural profits in a product that also carried television. And people lose sight of that. And as phones become not a thing that people need, landlines, what the fuck? Why even have one, right? And the cable bundle is now just too expensive and not a real thing. That protective shell has been ripped apart. And what it's been replaced by is Amazon Prime. No one thinks about canceling Prime Video because it's wrapped inside free shopping and books and all these other services, right? The main reason Apple TV is even in existence is because you got it for free for a year when you bought an Apple product, right? And Google's building a similar suite of products, and Microsoft is building a similar suite of products. And so these bundle wars, the replacement of the triple play, what I call the Maslow's hierarchy of feeds. This is the new game that we're in. And you'll have 3 or 4, maybe 5 individual services. You'll subscribe for a week to watch Stranger Things, and then you'll cancel. You'll subscribe for a week to watch one show or a movie, and then you'll cancel. Because that's what's happening. Serial churning is replacing channel changing. And so, these companies, Disco Brothers, as I call Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount, Fox, even Netflix, even Disney, they don't have an absolute purpose anymore. They're channels on a dial. They're not companies. They're publishers on a rack. They are not enterprises. And now, look, they could change if Disney bought Roblox. Fucking A, man. If Paramount bought Spotify, fucking A. That's a bundle. That's something I want to keep around. If Peloton, the New York Times, and Paramount decided to bundle together, okay. That's a set of itches that I need scratched on a daily basis. I'm going to touch that product every single fucking day. But that's the business we're in. We're not in the, hey, I want to watch Euphoria anymore. I do, and I'll subscribe for a week, and I'll watch Euphoria, and then I will cancel. Now, you can protect yourself by rolling the shows out, but at the end of the day, you can wait till the end of the season and watch the whole thing. We all know how that works. So, yeah, we are, even Spotify, one of the greatest entertainment properties in the history of mankind. No one should cancel Spotify, right? They're not profitable. They never will be profitable. They can't be profitable. They don't own anything. They're a tech platform that rents music and overpays for podcasts. So they're going to get bought by somebody at some point relatively soon. I think certainly by 2025, that's not a standalone company because they can't be. They can't compete against Apple and Amazon and Google. They can't. They can't. They won't. And they will be put out of business by these big tech death stars.
I mean, just so fascinating. You mentioned the New York Times, Peloton, I think Paramount bundle, right, as an example. Would that be the dream Evan Shapiro bundle to get all the scratches itched? Or what will be an ideal combination of products and services that for you personally, that would come together into a potential bundle to make your life easier?
I mean, yeah, I love the New York Times. I don't know. It's a good question. I think, I'm a big news junkie. So if I could get the BBC, the New York Times, and an ad-free, bile-less version of Twitter, all bundled in to a news feed that I could, pay a price for on an ongoing basis. Washington Post probably as well. MSNBC, I hate CNN now. So yeah, it'd probably be a news and sports bundle to a certain extent. But I'm not a big game player. I do watch a lot of TV, so I'm actually probably, my entertainment consumption habits are very Gen X. I'm more than happy to overpay for everything and have everything. I still have cable. So, I talk a lot about this stuff, but my behaviors are very rooted in the 90s. But I look at my kids and I think, if they could get a Netflix, Peloton, New York Times, um, uh, 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 theater live entertainment bundle. That's
Mm.
another thing that I think people seem to like. Disney does have all the right assets sitting in front of it. The IP, the parks. They just need to add some more products to it. Gaming, I would say, audio, I would say, to make it a more fulsome hierarchy of feeds. But I think Amazon. Look, I'm an Amazon Prime member, and part of that is free shipping. I do like their programming for the most part. But Thursday Night Football is a very compelling product for me, for them, as is their Wondery podcast suite. So, it depends on the day, frankly.
Makes a ton of sense. Now, you mentioned the Disney bundle and the Disney IP. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have some relationship to the Lion King. I know Chicago as well back in the day. What was your experience like getting Lion King on Broadway off the ground?
I mean, there were a lot of people that did that, but I was, I was there in the inner circle at the beginning, and I got to go see the first public performance in Minneapolis, and they were really worried about that show. They were
Why is
really
that?
worried about that. They thought it was a mess, and it was a little too long. And they did cut one thing out of it that made it about 5 minutes shorter. But I wrote this really long screed the day after because they were just like gnashing their teeth at a meeting after the show. And I said, "What the fuck are you worried about? So please stop." Um, and I mean, have you seen it on Broadway?
I haven't seen it, no.
I mean, it's now, I can't even remember how old it is. It's got to be close to 30 years now. Um, you know, it's a revelatory piece of art. Julie Taymor is a fucking genius. Nothing like it had ever been seen on stage before. And people have basically stolen ideas from it in the 3 decades since. So yeah, it was magic. Like no one had ever seen anything like it. Chicago was a lot of fun because I got to do some things on that show that no one had ever done before. So we did a live internet opening night on that show. I did trailers in movie theaters. This is before the movie existed. And, that show is the exact opposite of Lion King. Not that it's not great, it's a great show. But it's a very slimmed down, almost no set, almost no costumes, very, very, bare bones show. It's all about the music and not about the spectacle. But also, I think a really great statement on celebrity and America's fascination with comeback stories and bad boys and bad girls. And so, yeah, it was a really, and I got to work on all those things. I also got to work on John Leguizamo's Freak on Broadway simultaneously, which was a magical show to work on. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And now, I don't work in theater really much, although I'm directing a play currently, which is odd. But I don't really work in the theater that much anymore. But I'm on the Tony Management Committee. I'm on the Tony Awards board, the American Theater Wing. And that's a lot of fun because I get to help them steer the organization. They have a great leadership team there that runs that organization incredibly well. But I get to help them make decisions around media that they need to make, like the Tony Awards. So this past year, so the Tony Awards are on CBS, but there's a pre-show that's part of it. So there's 2 hours before the actual show where they give out a bunch of awards that you won't see on CBS. So best sets, best costumes, best couple of other things, orchestrations. And it's no performances, just awards. And I was able to convince CBS to put that show on Pluto.
Cool.
And CBS said, "I don't think anybody's going to watch it on Pluto." I said, "I think you're wrong." And they said, "Well, why do you think they're wrong?" I said, "Well, there's 50 million people in the United States that go to Broadway style theater every single year. More people than go to baseball and football and basketball combined. And they love it. And sometimes it's in a high school, but oftentimes it's in the Alley Theater in Houston or the Fox Theater in Detroit, the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis." And I said, "I think there's a lot of nerds, theater nerds out there in the world, and I think they're all going to show up." And they said, nah, but we'll try it. And they did, and to their credit. And it was the most biggest live stream they've ever had on their platform. And it shows you that as much as things change, they also stay the same. Live theater is never going to be replaced. It's having a hard time now because people aren't going back at the same rate they were prior to lockdown. But people want to be somewhere live and in person. They want to have unusual one-time experiences that can never be recreated. And there is this love of that art form that is shared by a nation of people. But you have to put it where they're watching. You have to put it in places like Pluto where they're finding new content. And there's a really good example. It's like, well, no one wants to watch ads on TV. Well, clearly they don't mind ads on TV if they don't have to pay for it. And so, there's a really classic example of the ecosystem reinventing itself into what was basically broadcast television from my youth with rabbit ears. To watch something as old school as actors giving awards to other actors for theater.
Unbelievable. And I mean, you're so deeply rooted in the broader media universe, and I feel like that's why you're able to, and you've done a bunch in this space, probably why you're able to map it out so beautifully and succinctly. You've talked about how these giant moguls, or I guess massive enterprises like the Apples and Amazons of the world, how they're growing rapidly. But what are you most excited about the media universe? I mean, there's so much change going on right now. What excites you the most? What coattails are you looking to see and grab onto it in the space? And what are you most looking forward to about seeing evolve over the next few years?
I'm really excited for the next generation of leadership in media, to be honest with you. When Gen Y can take over these companies, when Gen Z starts to come in, and they're already doing it, by the end of this decade, 50% of the workforce today is Gen Y and Gen Z. So by the end of this decade, it'll be 75 or 80%. And so, I'm excited to see what kind of art gets made. Greta Gerwig, and Barbie is a really good example. This is a Generation Y director, female director, given a property as storied as Barbie, and she made a feminist movie out of it. Was allowed to Warner Brothers' credit, and Mattel's credit, and to turn this somewhat sexist doll, who has an hourglass figure and her feet don't touch the ground, into this feminist icon. And, that's the kind of art that I think we can look forward to. I'm very excited by what comes out of the creator economy. I am a big fan of content on TikTok. Watched it for 2 hours today. So I'm very excited to see how the three most diverse generations who have ever walked the earth, the three most digitally native generations that have ever walked the earth, what they do to transform the ecosystem. It's why I surround myself with them all the time. All of my employees are in Generation Z. I spend a lot of time at Fordham and NYU for Generation Z. Both my daughters are in either Generation Y or Generation Z. And so, I'm the coattails. I always bet on the winners. I was a feminist before it was popular for men to be feminists. I was a board member of the Women in Cable Television organization years and years, 20 years ago. I'm one of the original board members of the Ghetto Film School, which I've worked with for 20 plus years. I'm the board chair of an organization called One Diverse Industry, which is its mandate is to find bridges to opportunity for people who are traditionally underrepresented inside the C-suites and leadership at media. But I'm very excited by what these young generations will do with the power that the ecosystem has handed them. And again, the creator economy, I think, is going to be a major driver of change in this ecosystem. It already is. Mr. Beast is one of the biggest stars on the face of the earth. He's worth $1.5 billion. But there are a lot of those out there who I think are going to be transformative to the ecosystem on an ongoing basis. So watching what comes, the types of, it's not even so much the types, but the stories that will be told and the way they'll be delivered and the new forms of entertainment we're going to see emerge out of these generations will be dramatically transformative. They will change the culture itself. It's not that they will just be different types of storytelling and different stories from different voices. They will also change the culture. And I think that's exciting.
I went to the Sphere a few nights ago in Las Vegas.
How was that?
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I mean, I'm excited for more venues like that to open up and for people to experience it, because it was.
What'd you say?
I didn't see U2, unfortunately. They weren't performing the night that I was in town. I saw the immersive experience, the Andy Sarkovsky immersive experience.
Oh, okay. So,
it was really wicked. But to that end, I mean, I'm excited to see, to your point, the future and what's to come as it relates to all things creative in the media universe. And maybe as we round out here, I'd love maybe your 2 cents or closing words of wisdom for a young creative or a young creator trying to hone in on their craft, figure out their niche and grow. What recommendations, what advice would you have for someone, or maybe for yourself 20 years ago?
Find an audience. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be passionate. My audience on LinkedIn is around 25, 30,000 people. Some days it balloons, but the core audience is 25, 30,000 people. And I super serve them, and it serves me back. You don't need to be the biggest star in the world in order to drive economic value for yourself. Find an audience, super serve that audience, build a cult, and then figure out the way to earn a living off of that love. People will pay you if they love you, but you have to give them something to love, and then you have to continue to do that, and you have to supply them what they demand. But don't think that you have to be Zendaya. You have to be in Spider-Man in order to be the biggest, star in the world, because that's a very rare thing, and it's going to become rarer. It's not going to become, more people aren't going to become that famous. Less people are going to become that famous because the filters are going to change. But if you can find 1,000 people to pay you $10 a month, it's $120,000 a year. If you find 10,000 people to pay you $5 a month, that's $1.2 million a year. So you can create an ecosystem for yourself that gives you the support necessary to make what it is that you want to make, or do the things that you want to do. But you have to think about who you're serving, and then you have to think about how to turn that into an enterprise that enables you to do the things you want to do. It isn't a follow your passion type of thing. It's be sensible, figure out what you want to do and who it's for, and then figure out ways to make it happen. And also surround yourself with really good people. This is not tennis. This is a team sport. And so, you don't have to be great at social media. Just find someone else who is. You don't have to be great at the numbers. Just find someone else who is, and then work together. I mean, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler are on tour right now, in the Restless Leg tour, right? They've been friends for 30 years. They met when they were 18, 19 years old. And they've been working together since, and they've been very successful at it. And by the way, neither of them is the biggest star in the world. Neither of them is Taylor Swift, right? Neither of them is, they do quite well for themselves, don't get me wrong, but none of their stuff has been, Barbie. They're popular, but they do what they do, and they do what they do well, and they serve their audience continuously. And now people are paying to go watch them goof around on stage for 90 minutes. Sean Hayes, Will Arnett, and Jason Bateman. That
so
stupid
good.
fucking show. That's a huge show, right? Yeah. It's just 3 guys sitting around talking to people that they are interested in. And again, they were stars beforehand, so there's that thing. But at the end of the day, you just have to figure out what your natural talents are, and then build a community and then a business around those natural talents.
I love it. Well, Evan, I'm greatly appreciative of your time. For those who weren't familiar with you before the show, where can they find you? Where can they keep in touch and learn more about you and your collateral?
My big platform is LinkedIn. So look for me there. I'm not hard to find. I'm there every day. And then my newsletter is called Media War and Peace. I publish it at least once a week, sometimes more than that. There's a tremendous, I think there's 200 articles on that newsletter. So it's worth some time. And if you don't like it, don't subscribe. If you do like it, do subscribe. And those are probably my 2 big platforms of choice.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to reconnecting with you soon.
Thanks, man.